Okay, so one of the things that we see in marriages all the time is one spouse really wants to hold on to always having to be right, and they lose track of the concept of winning together. So sometimes when we know we're right, we try to make the other spouse wrong, and it just doesn't work out for a long-term marriage to bring people closer together and to cherish our spouse.
Well, first, let's identify what it really means to be right versus winning.
Yeah.
And one of the best examples that I love to give is the person that is trying to cross the street, right? So you have this person that they are waiting, they're at the crosswalk. It says go, it's safe to go.
So it gives you permission. It's like it's time to walk
It
across.
is time to walk across the street. They don't look without hesitation. They just walk across the street because they're doing the right thing, right? But a car doesn't see the red light, doesn't see them, and then hits them.
Correct.
Right? So in that example, the pedestrian, they were right.
But they did not win.
They did not win.
They lost.
They lost big time.
They lost the game. Yeah. So when we see this in marriages, I mean, it could be something as simple as, it's the funny, you left your underwear on the floor again thing, right? Which, by the way, why do guys leave their underwear on the floor?
I don't know. Why do they leave their underwear
Because
on
they
the floor?
don't have a hamper that's close enough. They always you need a hamper, my friends. All right. But anyways, so if you leave your underwear on the floor, and it's so stereotypical, but the wife is like, I told you to pick up your underwear. How many times have I had to tell you this, right?
Mm-hmm.
The wife, instead of saying, what can we do to fix the root cause of this, which could be as simple as let's get a hamper. So instead of you dropping the underwear on the floor, you put it in the hamper. Instead, she has to be right and she has to make the husband wrong. And this is one of those things where these little tiny arguments, these little tiny times where you're making your spouse wrong, it starts to add up and it creates separation. It creates that drifting effect.
Yes. And it's funny that you're talking about the hamper because I'm sure
I love our hamper.
Yeah. There's going to be wives though that are on this that are like, we have a hamper.
And he still doesn't use it.
He still doesn't put his underwear in there. And so again, this is actually still an example of being right. You have a hamper. You know the underwear is supposed to go into the hamper, right? But you are choosing to make him wrong because his underwear are on the floor.
Yeah. So what could the spouse do to win?
Have a conversation. Have a conversation with them, a healthy conversation. Of course, this comes with a strong foundation in your marriage that you can have those open lines of communication where you're not attacking your spouse in this scenario, but instead it's just hey, it'd be really helpful for me. And if your spouse loves you, then they genuinely want to help you out, right? Hey, this would be really helpful if you just put those underwear in the hamper for me. That'd be really awesome. And then if it happens again, don't lash out, don't freak out, but instead just go, hey, so remember how we talked about that you were going to start putting your underwear in the hamper? Well, they're on the floor again. It's going to be okay. It's kind of the same example of your kids. How many times do you have to tell your kids something over and over again before it becomes a part of just what they do regularly? So just have a little bit of grace, a little bit of compassion that your spouse has a habit that they're just unaware of. And until you're able to help break that habit, the cycle's going to continue.
Yeah, it's a habit, but then it's also sometimes just a lack of awareness.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a lack of awareness of we're on the same team, we want each other to win. And when it's framed in a way where, if Lauren came up to me and was like, hey, you're leaving your stuff out again, what can we do together to win? Then I realized she's investing into a solution. She wants me to win. I want her to win. And then at that point, I feel motivated to actually, do the right thing. But when we put down our spouse or we turn that into an opportunity for an argument, that's when the separation starts. That's when people, they wake up and they're not intimate anymore. They're holding grudges against each other. That's when resentment starts to creep in, which, by the way, the enemy loves that. The enemy wants you separated. The enemy doesn't want you on the same team. It's so vital to be on the same page. Mm-hmm. So I want you guys to think about, where are you being right, which is causing you to not only lose and not win, but it's also pushing your spouse away. What are some of those things that are happening at home with you?
Right. And when you're looking at this too, one of the things that is a mistake that a lot of marriages will fall into the trap of is they won't communicate what they need with their spouse. Instead, they resort to complaining. They got to call their mom or they call their best friend and they start complaining about their spouse versus just having the conversation of how can we win together. And the more that you are complaining and the more that you are putting those negative words, we know this, words have power, right?
Absolutely.
And the more that you are speaking negativity about your spouse, about your marriage to other people, you're just reinforcing the negativity versus coming up with a winning solution.
Yeah. Complaining is the opposite of coming together.
Yeah.
And, coming together, getting on the same page and being a husband and wife team that allows cherishing to occur is really what's going to elevate and take the marriage to the next level. So being willing to kind of set your ego and pride aside as well is another really important thing to be mindful of. Mm-hmm. We don't have to be right.
Right. We just have to win.
We have to win.
And sometimes, and that is what it comes down to, is you go, but I'm right. Like being right is way more important than you guys just winning. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that you are submitting to what you believe to be right. Like, okay, we totally get it, but how can we just come together to just get on the same page and work through this one thing?
Yeah. So then it takes us to the question of how did this start? Like, where is the actual root of the desire that we have to be right and that we can't be wrong? So I invite you to trace this back in your childhood to one of those examples when you were young, probably between kindergarten and fifth grade, where for the very first time you were made to feel wrong or bad or misunderstood. Maybe you felt a great deal of shame or embarrassment around a situation that happened. And in that moment, your subconscious created this part of you that protects you. It's a survival mechanism to always have to be right. And we see this play out in so many areas in society, even outside of the home, right? All the arguments and the road rage and the traffic and all this stuff. We don't always have to be right. Now, if you trace this back and you discover that point when you were a child where you were made to feel wrong or bad, being right allowed you to regain confidence and control. But being right in a relationship right now causes that separation to start. It causes that crack in the foundation that unfortunately might not get repaired because right now it's super small and you don't see it, but over time it grows and it crumbles. And that's where the problem lies.
Yeah. When you're bringing up childhood, I'm sure that there are probably plenty of people that are watching this that are like, you just described my whole childhood.
Yeah.
My whole childhood, I was made to feel like I was wrong, like I was bad, like my opinion didn't matter, even when I knew that I was right, or, whatever. Or it could be something like super, super simple. Like you got in trouble for something that you didn't do. Like maybe your brother or your sister did it and you were the one that got blamed for it. So there's always that like moment though that does happen where you hold on to it, where you're like, nope, I'm never going to back down again. And it's okay because in a marriage is not about just this person and you guys enter this contract together. It's about this person and this person uniting together.
Yeah,
there's
becoming
a big
one.
difference.
Yeah, you can't become one if you're constantly holding on to having to be right.
Yes.
Right? That creates separation. That creates that divide. And what's fascinating is that pattern of behavior may have served you many times in your childhood, growing up into your teenage years, your young adult years, about having that confidence and like really like digging your heels in and not compromising, right? But in this example of marriage, it's like compromise is important. Becoming one is important. Cherishing your spouse is important. And when we can let go of that childhood survival mechanism to always be right, then we can start to say, hey, what can we do to win together? And that's one of the things that you and I have really intentionally started reframing our language around, right? Is like, what can we do to win together? And that's been super helpful.
Yeah, I would say that one thing that is really, really helpful is knowing that your spouse can't read your mind. So when you're not able to clearly communicate your own expectations, that's when being right versus winning will really kick in. So I'll give an example, right? So we were working with a couple where the wife would be frustrated because the kitchen would be left a mess and then she would have to clean it up. And by the time the kids get to bed, it's like, oh, it's late and now, whatever. And the husband is just doing his own thing. He's not intentionally not trying to help. It's that he didn't know that his wife needed the help. But more specifically was we asked the question, okay, well, when does the kitchen need to be cleaned by? And she goes, by 9 p.m.
And then I said, does he even know that you have this internal deadline? And she's like, no. I said, so you've never told him this, right? She's like, yeah, I've never told him that it needs to be done by 9 o'clock. But I have full expectations that it's done by 9 o'clock.
Right. So, in creating this environment of I have an expectation up here and he's not meeting this expectation that I have, you're making him wrong in something that he didn't even know he had an option in.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where we want to encourage you to do the concept of over communicating.
Yes.
Okay. Over communicating is feeling completely comfortable and on the same page about sharing your opinions, sharing your thoughts, sharing your wish list for your spouse so that they can actually help you win. And it could obviously, we're talking about household chores and things like that, but it also goes a step further with your actual needs.
Yes.
Needs for intimacy. How do you feel loved? Is your spouse, trying to only love you the way they think that you receive love, when in reality, you receive love differently. Mm-hmm. The book, The 5 Love Languages, obviously is a huge asset and resource for people to check out. But one of the things that's important is you have to be mindful that in order to really come together and get on the same page with your spouse, you have to have these open and transparent conversations regularly. I mean, literally daily. And one of the examples that we can share is I love words of affirmation. Lauren, on the other hand, she loves to receive love through physical touch. So if she came up and put her arm around me, that feels good. I like that. Or if she holds my hand, that feels great. But what feels amazing is when she gives me comforting words of affirmation. That's where I feel fulfilled, right? That's where my cup gets filled. But then on the flip side, if I just go, hey, you look awesome today, she loves hearing that, right?
It's nice. I like the compliment. But at the same time, if he walks past me and doesn't touch, I don't care if it's a tap on the shoulder or but whatever. If he doesn't touch me, I'm like, he's mad at me.
Yeah,
he doesn't love me.
Exactly.
No,
so here's
I don't say that, but
here's an example
yeah.
of where being right can actually cause problems.
Right.
In my mind, I could be like, well, I told her she looks beautiful and I told her that I love her. But even though I'm right because I did nice things, I'm not necessarily winning.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It's a perfect example.
I'm not winning
Mm-hmm.
because she receives love differently. So we went from dropping underwear on the floor. Now we're talking about love languages. But this all ties together because when you understand that winning involves communication, clear and open communication, then you don't have to be right. You can just go, hey, what's it going to take for me to win? Oh, you want me to, touch you and put my arm around you and hold your hand? And tell you you're beautiful. I can do all of those things, right?
Yes.
I don't have to just dig in and be right because I said that you look beautiful.
Yeah. And I'll say something to the women. A lot of men, they will show their love through acts of service, but also a lot of men like the compliments.
For sure.
This is just what we.
Well, you get a lot of hardworking guys out there, right?
And they're like, I'm putting in the hours, and then your wife is going, oh, he doesn't love me. He never wants to spend time with me. And
or he doesn't compliment me.
He doesn't compliment me, or he doesn't, whatever. But in his mind, he's like, I'm showing her how much I love her because I'm working so hard.
Yeah.
So being able to have that communication back and forth, what do you need? How do you show it? Because the other thing too is knowing that his love is through spoken word. If he does give me a compliment, even though that's not how I necessarily, like my top priority of how I receive love, I know that he loves me because he is speaking it through his language, right? So there is a balance that's there as well that gives you that like, okay, I get it. But it's also okay to remind and go, hey, just so you know, I really like it when you put your arm around me.
Yep, that's the key. So for everybody that's watching this right now, think about this. If you have a conversation with your husband or wife and you say, hey, what's the best way that I can show you love? Like, what can I do to make you feel completely fulfilled? That cup is full, your heart is full, you feel loved on. What can I do to cause that to happen?
Mm-hmm.
If they give you an answer that is completely different than what you were expecting, awesome. That's the answer for them. And that's how you can win together. You don't have to be right and stick with the ways that you've always done things. Be willing to have a flexible mindset and meet their needs.
And I will say this. This is the disclaimer on this one. Don't fall into the trap. Don't fall into the trap of saying to yourself, well, I'm not like, this is what we do as like kids and teenagers. I'm not going to do it because my mom told me that I was going to do it, right? So don't fall into the trap of, well, my spouse told me that that's what they want to do, so I'm not going to do it because I don't want them to think that I'm only doing it because that's what they said that they needed.
Yeah. We had a couple that we were working with who the wife, she recently said how much words of affirmation are important to her. Like that's her love language. That's how she feels loved, is when he gives her compliments and says nice things and is verbally supportive. Well, it was funny because he said that exact thing. He's like, well, now I feel that if I say what she wants me to say, that I'm being fake.
Right.
And here's the thing. Are you being fake or are you being supportive? So when Lauren, she knows that I love words of affirmation. When she gives me positive praise and acknowledges things that I'm doing in our business, and, she's like, that beard, looks well manicured and you look like a beautiful man. I'm like, thanks, babe. Makes me feel good. I never, ever feel like she's being fake because I know where her heart is. And I think that's an important thing to remember.
Yep. When you know that your heart is with your spouse, when you know that you are just there to show love and that you guys are completely unified, there's not a single part of that that's fake.
Exactly. Well, and the same goes for you, right? If I go and I put my arm around you, or I hug you, or I initiate a kiss, or I grab your hand, do you ever feel like I'm just doing that because you wanted that?
Not even for a split second. Like literally not even for a split second do I think to myself, oh, he's only doing that because he knows that that's how No, I'm like, it just feels good.
Well, and it feels good even beyond that because now you know your spouse is listening.
Right.
Your spouse is listening and they're making an active attempt at cherishing you.
Yes.
The way that it feels best.
Yes.
And that's a home run. So go for it. Try it out and let's see what happens.